right, so just behind me, you do see the Monte Carlo, and in this video feature, "Goodbye to the Monte Carlo." I think there's always a bit of sadness, a somber note to the closing of any casino. The implosions of casino are certainly dramatic. In this particular case, won't be an explosion; it'll be transformed into the Park MGM. I've seen some of the concept drawings, and it appears like it'll be on par with what you see going on in this park area, which is modern. There's an organic sentiment. There's the bit of the avant-garde with Bliss Dancer. There's the trees, which a little bit look like mini versions of the super trees at Gardens by the Bay in Singapore, which if you've been there, these can't compare. I mean, they're cool, but they're not the super trees. And I'm not saying they're trying to replicate those, but they do remind me of those a little bit. So I think one of the things to go back to the Monte Carlo to think about is, what was the significance of this transformation? What's really going on in terms of moving away from the theme? The Monte Carlo has certainly never had the opulence of, say, the Bellagio or the Venetian. In terms of the other place-based casinos, I think it certainly could compete with Luxor, perhaps with Paris, perhaps with New York, Excalibur for sure, because the Excalibur never had a realistic theme. The Monte Carlo, I think when you take the name of a place, that has such opulence associated with it, it's hard to compete with the place. Whereas with the Bellagio, what Steve Wynn and others have done there, no longer part of Steve Wynn's properties, but they did something significant. I think that gives the name, almost a right to use that name. Whereas perhaps the Monte Carlo, it couldn't deliver on that. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in the future. I think this is going to be an interesting transformation. We're undergoing it, some of it here. Again, when you see Bliss Dancer behind us, you realize that it's getting pretty dramatic in terms of the level of thematic transformation. So more to come in the future here in Las Vegas, Nevada, just outside of the Monte Carlo, which is soon to be Park MGM.
Okay, so we'll begin the tour, and it's interesting, I think, to talk about maybe why the Monte Carlo didn't succeed longer than, say, 2016, 2017, when the change is going to be happening soon with Park MGM. So when you have a place-based themed casino, in this case we're focusing on Monaco and this particular historic casino in Monte Carlo, which is partially the inspiration for the Monte Carlo facade. Whenever you have that sort of place-based association, I think there's an expectation of the guest. I remember actually the Monte Carlo when it first opened. I think the night it opened, I was actually on the Strip, and I remember some people were getting ready to go and stay there. I think it had just opened that year. And so there was a lot of excitement. But again, as you look at Monaco, you think about Monte Carlo, their guests probably have expectations. And that's one danger with place-based theming, is that if there isn't a lot of room for variance, if the association here is high-class, bourgeois, say, versus other place-based associated casinos on the Strip, then I think there could be a challenge. And I'll talk about later that maybe the Monte Carlo never fully delivered on its promises in terms of what it was trying to connote. If you read about the history of the casino, it actually earlier was going to be a more British themed casino called the Grand Victorian, and later the Victorian. You look at this image here now at City Center in Monte Carlo, you also see that the abstractness of City Center is sort of dwarfing the place-based theme of the Monte Carlo. Had to use a lot of Creative Commons images because I don't have as many as I would like. So this is from '95, and you see the construction of the Monte Carlo. It certainly was dramatic. As I said, I remember flying in on the plane the year it opened, and people were so excited to stay there. And that's always happening with casinos in Vegas, the initial excitement. Over the years, though, unfortunately, I would say, that excitement begins to wear off. This is another image I discovered. I wanted to show you this one. It's of the lobby, and this is another Creative Commons image I found. So grateful to have these. This is from 2005. So I don't have a lot of interior shots, but this is one that indicates that, you have the marble, you have the ornate chandeliers and so forth, but this, say, never reaches the level of the Bellagio's registration desk, or the Paris. If you know the Paris's, that's really quite nice with all the chandeliers and so forth. So I always felt like the theme wasn't executed fully as maybe it could have been. This is actually a shot of mine, and the earliest shot I could find, and this is from 2002. And I show this, I'm zooming in here on these gas street lamps. So this is part of the ambiance. You could see at the time Lance Burton had a show there. My earliest image I had of the outside of the Monte Carlo. Kind of kicking myself now that I didn't do more documentation of the casino, and I'll talk about this at the end of the video. It's one of the, I think, tragedies of losing a casino is you lose a lot of the memories, the images, the architecture. But it's great to have these images that I discovered on Flickr Creative Commons. Look at this. This is the food court, Monaco Garden, 2005. And I didn't realize actually it was called, it had a Monaco/Monte Carlo theme to it. So I was surprised to see that. I'll show you images of how that's changed later in a video I did many years after that, the food court. This is from 2007. I'm showing this one because over time, I want to say in the 2010s, early is my guess, they opened Diablo's Cantina. I almost call that like theme creep or creep of non-thematic elements on the theme. This is another just example of how the theme was, I think, still being maintained. 2008, another Creative Commons image. You see the ornateness, you see the fountains, you see the statuary. Now, again, it's never anything as, dramatic as what you see at Caesars or Bellagio. Perhaps that's a problem. That was always my sensibility about the Monte Carlo was the theme and its execution. Now, very tragic in 2008, there was the giant fire. Over $100 million worth of damage. There was I believe, a blowtorch that caught some of the materials on fire, and it was just a dramatic scene on the Strip. I don't think this contributed to, guest perceptions, but it'd be interesting to see if there had been any marketing studies or anything after this to see what the guest reaction was. I'm not entirely sure, but that was in 2008, that unfortunate fire that got a lot of publicity. Now, this is interesting. 2009, you had the Unpretentiously Luxurious campaign. I don't have images of this because they would be copyrighted, but there were ads in USA Today and many newspapers and magazines that had misspelled French words, and the idea was that it was chic but in an unpretentious way. And the branding experts who created this said it's revolutionary because you've never had this where you have a luxurious brand that's being sort of made fun of. And I just have to say, personally, I don't think that campaign worked. I remember when it came out, and I just thought it was contradictory. I think you're giving the guest two different impressions. In a sense, you're almost drawing attention to the fact that the luxury isn't as high as, say, the luxury of the Bellagio or Caesars or Paris. Now, this is what I was talking about. When you get Diablo's Cantina in 2010s, I feel like it starts to eat away at the theme of the Monte Carlo. So maybe this was the beginning of the end, frankly. You never know. I've heard recently that with the Park MGM to be opened, this may actually go away. And that's interesting because it may not be seen as something that fits in thematically, visually with what they're trying to do with a more sophisticated, abstract, nature, park-based casino, resort, theater area. This is an image of mine from the 2000, I think it's, let's see, the title here is coming up, 2010. There was some construction going on. So certainly all casinos, you see this level of construction over the years. But, you begin to notice, like, okay, things are changing. What's going to happen with the Monte Carlo? The Park MGM, which is going to replace this in maybe 2018, is about $500 million. It's a major remodel, major renovation, and I have to say it looks great. It looks absolutely like it's going to be an incredible casino and resort area. This is from 2017 in August, and I wanted to show you this because we still have the statuary up top, but look at the entrance. Look how different it is. They've stripped away the theme, even the font and the name of the Monte Carlo on the entrance. You could say they could almost take out the lights, put Park MGM on there, the signage, and they'd be set. So the transformation is really nearly complete, and I noted that, and I'll show you some additional inside shots later. Now, lo and behold, I did a video 4 or 5 years ago on the Monte Carlo, and I'm just going to talk over this, showing you, some of my footage. So you see that, unlike that last shot you saw, they've maintained, look, the gas lamps here. You have the fountain, you have the entrance area. That's radically changed as well if you've been to Vegas. I don't think I have any shots of that, but the front entrance area has changed along with what's going on next door at the park. the park, as it's called, which is right next to New York, New York. But that whole front entrance area is quite radically different as well in terms of what they've done there. And I think it looks quite nice, actually, but it's radically different. So my suggestion to you is maybe we're seeing a few factors. I want to talk about maybe 3 of these. One is the decline of place-based theming. I hope it's not the case. I've said this in a lot of my writing and other videos, but I feel like, with the Luxor, there's an alteration of the theme, a de-theming, as MGM press folks have told me over the years. I think Paris is still pretty strong, although the Budweiser Park is changing out a little bit. The other thing we see happening with casinos is the boutique hotel. There'll be the Nomad at the Park MGM. There's the Delano, which I just did a video about at Mandalay Bay. So that's another thing. There was the boutique hotel on top or part of Monte Carlo as well, so that'll be maintained. The other thing, I mentioned this earlier, I think the challenge was the execution of the theming. If you have a high-class, bourgeois, ritzy association, I don't think you can pull it off in a halfway sense. And the campaign in 2009, I don't think helped. I don't think it was effective to make fun and misspell the words and try to pretend that you're luxurious, but in an unpretentious way. Maybe the Bellagio is pretentious to walk into, but it looks pretty darn good, I have to say. So that, I think, is a challenge with anytime you think about, creating, a casino and its place-based, you have to think about that. Now, here is the mall, and I'll show you in a little bit how this is a construction zone now. And this was one of my issues also with the execution of place-based theming, the lack of consistency. And I think maybe this was the trend where they were saying, hey, we're going to eventually move away from this, although this is all stripped away now and redone anyway. So I don't think that was the case. But you could see here, this is not very much. And in fact, those used to be cobblestone streets, and I thought I had an image of this. So that changed over time. We went from the cobblestone to the more modern look. So in a sense, you get this Vegas issue going on where we strip away place-based cobblestone streets and we try to do the sleek stuff instead. This has been transformed over the years, as I showed you with that image of the food court and so forth from earlier, but that's kind of interesting too, to think about just how much it's changed. And you're seeing a little bit of the edge of the casino, but not a lot of video of that. Okay, so back to some of the concepts. This is the Park MGM. They're going to have this giant Mario Batali Eataly, which they also have in New York. I think it's going to be amazing. The Park Theaters is very cool. Look at the facade that they're proposing there. And you can see this whole green area in front with all the trees, and I think it could be quite stunning, because taking advantage of what's already happening next to New York, New York, with the park area, Bliss Dancer, the amazing sculptures, the lights, and so forth. This, I think, could be very iconic. I'm glad they're not just doing it in that abstract, almost cold sense. I love City Center, but some of it's a little cold if you think about it. The greenery stuff, I think, is a great idea, and I'll show you some of what they're intending here. So this is that mall that we just saw that's been stripped away, and this is they're getting ready for the transformation. You'll notice there's all these quotes. This is from 2017. I just was there in August, and you could see here they have all these nature quotes. This was kind of interesting, and they have the leaf motif and so forth. So clearly the intent here, I haven't read a lot of the planning documents for Park MGM, but it seems like the intent is to go with a heavily nature-based themed. I think that could be quite smart, because it's not a common theme on the Strip. Here are some of the chandeliers, maintaining, chandelier type fixtures, but more modern, not that kind of classical or neoclassical, whatever you call it, theme that they had in the past, say in the lobby. And here, this looks to be like an outdoor eating area, so maybe they're going to continue the Vegas trend of outdoor eating and retail and entertainment arenas, which I think has been very successful with the Link, with the park, and some of the other venues opening up on the Strip. This is quite dramatic. So I took this in 2017. This is the check-in area, and look at it. It looks nothing like that old image that we saw, which had all the classical stuff and the thematic stuff. So the transformation is nearly complete. I mean, it's dramatic. I would say in some ways it's kind of sad. I mean, there's a bittersweet side of me that says we're going to miss some of the charm of what was once at the Monte Carlo. And this is another sign of that, as I mentioned earlier. This is from 2017. The entrance area, it all but has jettisoned the theme. We'll have to see what happens with the columns there. I'm a little curious about that. But it seems like if you look at those concept images I just showed you of Park MGM, it seems like they don't have that far to go. They were really well on their way in terms of the construction in August of 2017, and I thought they're definitely getting close. So we'll see. Maybe another year or so is the anticipated opening. We'll see what happens. Now, to close this video out a little bit, and here's an image of the park, which again I think is a very nice space, and I think it'll fit in with what they're doing with the Park MGM. But to close this video, I wanted to say a little bit about not what we learn about the decline of the theme and the change of the theme, but what we can learn about studying Vegas casinos and their transformation over time. And the first thing I would say is we should explore the archives. So I try to go on Flickr. UNLV has a great casino concept design library, digital library you can look at. I don't get to use a lot of those because they're not allowing reproduction and videos and so forth. But that's a side of this to remember, is we need to really explore the images and videos out there, particularly when a casino changes and it's no longer the Monte Carlo. How do we preserve that? We shouldn't only preserve classical sites of antiquity and heritage. We should really preserve the pop culture sites. You might think I'm crazy, but that's my view on cultural heritage, and I have a piece coming out in a book in a little bit, in a year or so, that talks about that. The second thing is documentation. I would argue that we have to document these spaces. I'm so upset with myself that over time I didn't take videos of the different eras, because I generally go to Vegas once or twice a year, and I just wish I had more still images and videos to complement what I'm trying to do here to talk about stuff. Fortunately, I have the Flickr images, but it really does strike me that we have to think about the documentation of these sites of popular culture. So if you're like me and you're obsessed with theme spaces, if you study them, whatever, if you're just a fan, take a bunch of photos, take a bunch of videos when you go to the Strip, because who knows, the casino of today will be gone in very short time. And it's something to remember, I think, as we reflect on the closure, transformation, if you will, of the Monte Carlo. So we bid the Monte Carlo goodbye today. In 2017, it's very close to becoming complete, the transformation to the Park MGM. It's a bittersweet moment, but we know Vegas. If you know Vegas, it's always about constant flux and transformation. What is hip one day will not necessarily be hip the next, and so it's all about change and transformation. So I hope you enjoyed the video feature today here on the Monte Carlo, and please do come back for additional video features of the Immersive World's Handbook.